My younger brother, Liam, stumbled upon me in a private moment, but I have to confess it didn't bother me, and I suspect he wasn't too disturbed either. It all began on a tranquil Tuesday evening. The house was unusually quiet. Mom and Dad were out for the night, leaving just Liam and me. He'd always possessed a playful streak, a talent for finding inventive ways to irritate me when we were younger. Lately, though, things had evolved into a more harmonious rhythm. We weren't constantly at odds, and the house felt peaceful. I was home from college for fall break. It had been months since my last visit, and a rush of nostalgia washed over me the instant I stepped inside. My old room remained largely untouched, though the posters on the walls were faded and my desk was cluttered with items my parents had stored there. It was like stepping back in time. I'd missed this feeling of being home, enveloped by familiar sights and sounds. Liam had changed, though. I noticed it immediately when he entered the kitchen to greet me. He wasn't the lanky, awkward kid I remembered from a few years back. He was taller, more self-assured. He looked almost like a different person, a stranger who felt strangely familiar. "What?" he'd asked, catching me staring. "Nothing," I'd replied quickly, shaking my head. "You just look different." He grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's called growing up, Jack. You should try it sometime." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't suppress a smile. He had a way of making everything feel lighter, like nothing was ever a big deal. But there was something else about him now, something I couldn't quite define. That night, after dinner and hours of catching up, I finally retreated to my room. The day had been long, traveling, unpacking, and processing the emotional weight of returning home after so long. All I craved was a shower and a good night's sleep. My old bed creaked as I lay down, the mattress dipping in all the familiar spots. The house was silent except for the occasional noise of Liam moving around in his room down the hall. I closed my eyes, allowing the comfort of being home to envelop me. But sleep eluded me. Instead, my thoughts drifted. It had been a while since I'd experienced any intimacy. College life was hectic, overflowing with coursework and leaving little time for socializing. I hadn't connected with anyone in months, and lying there in the dark, that reality weighed on me. I tossed and turned, my body restless, my thoughts straying to unexpected places. And then, without warning, my mind fixed on Liam. I felt my breath catch. The image of him standing in the kitchen earlier that night flashed through my mind. The way his shirt hugged his torso, the effortless confidence in his smile, the warmth of his embrace. I'd dismissed it at the time, but now, in the quiet of my room, those thoughts returned, intensified and more vivid. What was wrong with me? This was Liam, my little brother. I shouldn't be having these thoughts. But the more I tried to suppress them, the stronger they grew. My heart raced as I recalled the way he looked at me when I teased him, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I pictured his voice, low and playful, whispering my name. It wasn't just his physical appearance that had transformed. There was an aura about him now, something that made it impossible to overlook him. I bit my lip, my body flushing as my thoughts intensified. My hand slipped beneath the covers, hesitantly at first, but soon I surrendered to the moment. I closed my eyes, allowing the fantasy to consume me, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt alive. It wasn't long before it happened. I was lost in my own world when my bedroom door swung open. "Jack?" Liam's voice sliced through the silence, and I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. He stood in the doorway, his hand still on the knob, his eyes wide as they registered the scene. My face burned as I realized how exposed I was, my hands still under the blanket, my breathing ragged. I scrambled to sit up, clutching the blanket around me as if it could erase what he'd witnessed. "What the hell, Liam?" I yelled, my voice louder than intended. "Ever heard of knocking?" I didn't know," he stammered, his face reddening. He looked away, awkwardly scratching the back of his neck. "I just wanted to see if you wanted to watch a movie or something." "Well, clearly I'm busy," I snapped, though my voice trembled with embarrassment. "And it is 11 p.m. Liam, go to bed." My heart was hammering so hard I was certain he could hear it. "I can see that," he mumbled, glancing towards my sheets, his tone somewhere between amused and stunned. He looked back at me, his eyes lingering for a second before quickly averting his gaze again. I'll leave you to it then." He turned to go, but before he could close the door, I blurted out, "Wait!" I wasn't sure why I'd said it. Perhaps it was panic, or maybe the tension hanging between us. Whatever it was, the word escaped before I could stop it. Liam paused, his hand on the doorknob, and looked back at me. His expression was unreadable, his face still flushed. What? I hesitated, my mind racing for something to say, some way to salvage the situation. But the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. Not yet. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell. He gave a small nod, his eyes meeting mine briefly before darting away. It's fine, he said, his voice softer now. Should have knocked, I mumbled. We stood there in silence, the air thick with tension. My pulse throbbed in my ears, my face still burning with embarrassment. But there was something else, too, a feeling I couldn't quite place. Do you want to come in? I asked, the words escaping before I could process them. Liam raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Seriously? Yeah, I said quickly, though my voice wavered. I mean, you're already here, so... He hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, his expression cautious yet inquisitive. So, he said after a beat, what exactly were you doing in here? My face flushed again, and I groaned, pulling the blanket over my head. Oh my God, can we not talk about it? Liam chuckled, a low, warm sound that inexplicably made my chest tighten. Relax, Jack, I'm just messing with you. I peeked out from under the blanket, glaring at him. You're such a jerk. He grinned, a teasing smirk that made my heart skip a beat. Yeah, but you love me anyway. I didn't reply, but he wasn't wrong. The room felt smaller with Liam in it, the air denser, making it harder to breathe. He remained casually leaning against the wall, arms crossed, that playful smirk still dancing on his lips. I couldn't decipher whether he was genuinely amused or simply trying to diffuse the awkwardness, but either way, it wasn't working. My heart still pounded with embarrassment, and I couldn't meet his gaze for more than a fleeting second without wanting to burrow under the covers and disappear. Relax, Jack, Liam said, his voice softening. It's not like I haven't walked in on worse. Worse? I shot him a skeptical look, attempting to regain some composure. What's worse than your brother, you know? He shrugged, his smirk widening. Oh, I don't know. I once walked in on Dad trimming his nose hair, shirtless. Scarring, I muttered, and I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a hearty laugh, more of a startled chuckle, but it was enough to alleviate some of the tension. Liam grinned, evidently pleased with himself, and for a brief moment, things felt normal again. Like we were just two brothers hanging out, without the awkwardness, the unspoken tension. But the feeling was fleeting. The silence that followed was heavy, and I could feel his eyes on me, scrutinizing me too intensely. It made my skin crawl, like he could see right through me, past the embarrassment and into the thoughts I was desperately trying to suppress. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, as if it could protect me from whatever was happening between us. So, Liam began, his tone deliberately casual. Who were you thinking about? What? My head shot up and I stared at him, my face burning. No one. I wasn't. What kind of question is that? He shrugged again, his expression infuriatingly neutral. I'm just saying you looked pretty into it. Must have been someone special. It was as if he knew. Liam! I threw a pillow at him, which he caught effortlessly, laughing. Can you stop? Fine, fine. He held up his hands in mock surrender, still chuckling. But then his laughter subsided and his expression shifted, becoming more serious. I'm just messing with you, Jack. You don't have to freak out. Geez, I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Yeah, well, maybe don't barge into my room unannounced next time. Noted, he said, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched on, and I found myself staring at him, observing the way the soft light from my bedside lamp accentuated the curve of his jaw, the way his hair fell slightly into his eyes. He'd always been a handsome kid, but now he looked different, older, more confident. It was disorienting, like I was seeing him for the first time. Why are you looking at me like that? Liam's voice interrupted my thoughts, and I realized too late that I'd been staring. I wasn't, I started, but he raised an eyebrow, cutting me off. Yeah, you were. I groaned, pulling the blanket over my head again. Just go away, Liam. Nope, not until you tell me what's going on. There's nothing going on, I shouted, my voice muffled by the blanket. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. There was something happening, Something I didn't understand, something I couldn't even begin to articulate. And the way he was looking at me now, like he could see straight through me, wasn't helping. Liam moved closer. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I felt the mattress dip under his weight and my heart skipped a beat. I peeked out from under the blanket, and he was right there, his face mere inches from mine. His expression was unreadable, his eyes searching mine as if he was trying to decipher something. "You're acting weird," he said quietly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I muttered, but my voice lacked conviction. "Jack," he said, his tone soft yet firm. "Come on, talk to me." I hesitated, my chest tightening. I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling, didn't know how to verbalize it without sounding completely insane. How was I supposed to tell him that I couldn't stop thinking about him? That he'd been in my head all night? That even now, sitting so close, he was all I could think about? "It's just," I trailed off, swallowing hard. "It's been a weird night." Liam tilted his head, studying me. "Weird how?" I couldn't answer. The words wouldn't come. I couldn't speak. Instead, I looked away, focusing on the blanket bunched in my lap, hoping he'd drop it. But he didn't. He remained there, waiting, his presence impossible to ignore. "Jack," he said again, his voice softer this time. "You can tell me." Something in his tone broke through the wall I'd been trying to erect. It wasn't teasing or judgmental. It was genuine, filled with concern, like he actually cared. And that made it even harder to keep everything bottled up. "I don't know what's wrong with me," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "It's like I'm thinking things I shouldn't be thinking. About you," I confessed. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt my stomach twist. I couldn't believe I'd actually said it out loud. I braced myself for his reaction, for him to pull away, laugh it off, or get angry. But he did none of those things. Instead, he stayed put, his expression unreadable. "What kind of things?" he asked quietly. It was as if he wasn't surprised by my confession. I hesitated, my throat tight. "Things I shouldn't be thinking," I repeated, my eyes fixed on the blanket. "I don't know why. It just happened." Liam was silent for a long moment, and my chest tightened with each passing second. But then, to my surprise, he reached out, his hand resting lightly on my arm. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, but it sent a jolt through me all the same. "Jack," he said softly, his voice steady, "it's okay." I looked up at him, my heart pounding. "It is?" He nodded, his hand still on my arm. His words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of meaning. "Yeah, it's okay." Liam's voice was calm and steady, but the weight of what he'd just said made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure if I'd heard him correctly, if he really meant it, or if he was simply trying to diffuse the awkwardness. But the way he looked at me, so steady, so sure, made me think he wasn't just saying it to make me feel better. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the next move, to say something that would either break the tension or push things forward. "Liam," I started, my voice shaky, "I don't know what's wrong with me." He tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Why do you think something's wrong with you?" "Because this isn't normal," I blurted out, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You're my brother. I shouldn't—" "Stop," he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. His hand moved from my arm to my shoulder, squeezing lightly. "Don't do that. Don't make it sound like you're broken or something. You're not." I blinked, caught off guard by his words. "But—" "No," he said, cutting me off again. "Jack, you're not some kind of freak. You're just feeling something, and that's okay." "Is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because it doesn't feel okay. It feels wrong." "Does it?" he countered, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're beating yourself up over something you can't control. And honestly, I don't think you should." I stared at him, my heart pounding. The way he was looking at me, the way he spoke, it was like he wasn't just trying to comfort me. There was something else there, something deeper. I didn't know what it was, but it made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. "Why aren't you freaking out about this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You should be freaking out." He gave a small shrug, his lips quirking into a faint smile. "Maybe I'm just better at keeping my cool than you are." "Liam?" "Jack," he said, interrupting me again. "Do you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I trust you." Then trust me when I say this doesn't have to be a big deal, he said softly. It's just us. No one else has to know. No one else has to understand. It's just you and me. His words sent a shiver through me, and I felt my chest tighten. The way he said it, so calm and assured, made it sound so simple. But it wasn't simple. It was complicated and messy and terrifying. And yet, the way he was looking at me, the way his hand rested on my shoulder, made it feel like maybe it didn't have to be. Liam, I said, my voice barely audible, what are you saying? I'm saying I don't care if it's normal or not, he replied, his voice steady. I care about you. And if this is something you're feeling, then maybe I feel it too. My breath hitched, and I stared at him, my mind racing. Did he really mean that? Was he really saying what I thought he was saying? I didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to do. All I knew was that my heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely hear anything else. Before I could stop myself, I reached out, my hand brushing against his. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around mine, his touch warm and steady. The simple gesture sent a wave of relief and something deeper, something I didn't want to name, washing over me. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't even know what this is. Me neither, he said, his voice soft. But maybe we don't have to know. Maybe we just figure it out together. His words made my chest ache, and I felt my eyes sting. I didn't know why I was so emotional, why his words affected me so deeply, but they did. I nodded slowly, squeezing his hand. Okay. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just sat there, our hands clasped, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. It was like the world had faded away, leaving just the two of us, caught in this moment that felt both impossible and inevitable. And then, before I could overthink it, I leaned in. The kiss was soft, hesitant, like we were both testing the waters. His lips were warm, and I could feel the faint tremor in his hand as he held mine. The kiss was clumsy, a nervous fumble stemming from the uncertainty of what we were doing. Yet, it was real. It was us. When we pulled apart, his eyes met mine, reflecting the same blend of fear, hope, and something akin to relief that I felt. Neither of us spoke, but words weren't necessary. In that moment, everything we couldn't articulate was conveyed in the way we looked at each other. Liam offered a small smile, his hand still clasped in mine. See? Not so scary, he said. I chuckled softly, the sound shaky but genuine. Speak for yourself, I replied. He grinned, and for the first time all night, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The air crackled after the kiss, as if something had irrevocably shifted between us. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind struggling to process what had just transpired. Liam was quiet, his gaze steady on me, and for once I couldn't decipher his thoughts. He wasn't laughing, teasing, or dismissing it. He was simply present, and the intensity of his presence made my chest ache. Did that feel wrong to you? He asked softly, breaking the silence. I shook my head, my voice caught in my throat. No, I whispered. It didn't. Good, he responded, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. Because it didn't feel wrong to me either. I exhaled shakily, the weight of his words settling over me. I'd spent so long convincing myself these feelings were unnatural, something to be ashamed of. But hearing him say that, hearing him validate my feelings, made everything seem a little less terrifying. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely a murmur. Liam shrugged, his smile fading into something softer, more vulnerable. I don't know. I've never done this before, Jack, but I think we just take it one step at a time. Figure it out as we go. His words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. I nodded slowly, my fingers still intertwined with his. Okay. The silence stretched between us again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was comforting, like we were finally on the same page, finally releasing all the unspoken tension that had been building between us. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Do you want to talk about it? Liam asked after a moment, his tone cautious. Talk about what? About why you've been acting so weird lately? I said, my lips curving into a faint smile. Because let's be honest, Jack, you've been weird. I groaned, pulling my hand away to cover my face. I don't know, I admitted, my voice muffled. It's just, everything about you feels different now, and it's messing with my head. Different how? he asked, leaning closer. I hesitated, my cheeks burning. You're not the same annoying kid I grew up with, I finally said. You're confident, grown up, and I don't know how to handle that. Liam's smiles widened, a hint of mischief returning to his expression. So what you're saying is, you think I'm hot? Oh my God, stop, I groaned, throwing a pillow at him. He caught it easily, laughing, and the sound made my chest tighten in a way that was both comforting and infuriating. He leaned in and kissed me again, briefly. I'm just saying, he teased, tossing the pillow back onto the bed. You could have just said that instead of making it all dramatic. Yeah, well, I'm not exactly thrilled about it, I muttered, though my lips twitched into a reluctant smile. The playful banter masked a deeper conversation we were having without words. Liam's laughter faded, and his expression softened. You don't have to be ashamed, Jack, he said quietly. It's just us. No one else has to know. He joined me on the bed, and the calmness in his voice made my chest ache. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I whispered. Just us. But as I said it, he was beside me, having witnessed my release without a word. He took over where I left off, and it was incredible. I'd never felt anything like it. When he noticed I was nearing my climax, he leaned over to ensure things didn't get messy. Afterward, neither of us could speak for a moment. It felt both wrong and exhilaratingly right, the best thing I'd ever experienced. The rest of the night was a blur. We didn't kiss again, didn't push things further, but the dynamic between us had undeniably shifted. The tension remained, but it wasn't as heavy. It was like we'd taken the first step into uncharted territory, and now we were simply trying to navigate it together. Liam stayed in my room for a while, sitting on the edge of the bed as we talked about everything and nothing. It felt like old times, like when we were kids staying up late whispering secrets in the dark. But now there was an undercurrent of something else, something deeper, something neither of us fully understood. When he finally left for his own room, I felt both relieved and strangely empty. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of him. The way he'd kissed me, the way his hand had felt in mine, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. It was overwhelming but impossible to ignore. The next morning, I woke to footsteps in the hallway. For a moment, I thought it was our parents, but then I remembered they were away for the weekend. It was just me and Liam. I got out of bed and went downstairs, my heart pounding at the thought of seeing him again. I wasn't sure what to expect, awkwardness maybe, or tension. But when I walked into the kitchen, I entered the kitchen to find him at the table, a bowl of cereal in front of him. He looked utterly normal, too normal. Morning, he said, flashing a grin. Sleep well? Yeah, I mumbled, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. You look like a baby, he teased, his tone light. But as I sat down across from him, I caught his eyes lingering on me for a beat too long, his smile softening slightly. It made my chest tighten all over again. We ate breakfast in relative silence, the occasional clinking of spoons against bowls filling the void. I could feel his gaze on me, making it difficult to concentrate. My mind kept replaying the previous night's events, the kiss, the way he'd said, just us. Jack, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat at the seriousness in his voice. Are you okay? Yeah, I replied quickly, though my voice wavered. Why wouldn't I be? He tilted his head, studying me. Because last night was a lot, and I just want to make sure you're not freaking out. I'm fine, I insisted, my cheeks burning. Really? He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. If you say so. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but the tension between us simmered just below the surface. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands felt charged, like we were both anticipating something. I didn't know what, but I knew it was coming. And when it finally did, I wasn't prepared. The air grew thick with unspoken tension as the day wore on. Every small interaction, every look, every word he spoke, even the silences when we were in the same room. It was like a storm brewing. I knew it was only a matter of time before it broke. That evening, the house was quiet again. Our parents had called to say they'd be staying at Grandma's another night, leaving Liam and me alone. He'd gone to his room after dinner, leaving me on the couch with the TV playing softly in the background. I tried to focus on the screen, but my mind kept wandering, replaying the kiss, the way he'd looked at me afterward, like I wasn't just his brother, but something more. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. Lost in thought, I didn't hear him come back downstairs. When he sat down beside me, I jumped, startled by his sudden presence. "Sorry," he said, his lips curving into a small smile. "Didn't mean to scare you." "It's fine," I said quickly, though my heart was still racing. For a while we just sat there, the TV casting a faint glow across the room. Neither of us spoke, but the tension was palpable. I could feel his gaze on me, making my skin prickle. "Jack," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "Can we talk?" I turned to him, my chest tightening at the seriousness in his tone. "About what?" "About us," he said, his gaze steady. "About last night." My stomach flipped. I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation, but I nodded anyway. "Okay." He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about it all day," he admitted. "About what happened. About what it means." "And?" I prompted, my voice barely a whisper. "And," he trailed off, his cheeks flushing slightly, "I think I don't want to pretend it didn't happen." His words sent a jolt through me. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "You don't?" He shook his head, his eyes meeting mine. "No, I don't. Because it didn't feel wrong, Jack. It felt right." The conviction in his voice made my chest ache. I opened my mouth to respond, but words failed me. I didn't know how to articulate the whirlwind of emotions inside me. All I knew was that he was looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered, and it made me want to cry. "I'm scared, Liam," I finally admitted, my voice trembling. "This is all so new, and I don't know what to do." "You don't have to know," he said softly. "We'll figure it out together." He reached out, his hand brushing against mine, and a shiver ran through me at the simple touch. I looked down at our hands, then back up at him, my throat tight. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I've never been more sure about anything," he said, his voice steady. "I care about you, Jack, more than I probably should, but I'm done trying to ignore it." His words hit me like a wave, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, but it quickly deepened as all the emotions I'd been holding back came rushing to the surface. His hands moved to my shoulders, pulling me closer, and I felt my heart swell with something I couldn't name. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We keep this just between us," he said softly. "We take it slow, and we figure it out." I nodded, my chest tight. Okay. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel ashamed. All I felt was him, his warmth, his presence, his unwavering support. And it was enough. That night, lying side by side on the couch, the TV still playing softly in the background, I realized something. What we had might not be normal. It might not be something anyone else could understand, but it was ours. And that was enough for now. It was enough. I know my story might sound strange to some people, but I'm glad I can share it. I feel guilty, though. Should I? Please let me know what you think in the comments.